Dilvari had returned to Arander and the ruins of Nightcaller Temple. She had a lot of questions about what had occurred to her and how Vermina's voice had entered into her head. She wanted to know more about the Daedra and the Divines. Arander agreed to help her out and discuss with her throughout the night what she should do. The first thing he did was he allowed her to have a copy of a book called the Book of Daedra. In it listed all the different Daedra and their spheres of influence. And particularly, she paid attention to Vermina, whose sphere was the realm of dreams and nightmares. It helped her understand the Daedra a bit more. Dilvari spent the rest of the evening looking over the books that Arander had to share with her. In particular, she was struck by one book called The Lost Legends of Skyrim. This book talked about several legends, but in particular one caught her attention, and that was the legend of Red Eagle. The next morning she talked to Arander. She asked him to come with her and show her the way to Solitude and the Temple of the Divines. They left early the next morning in the cold, frigid air of Skyrim. Now, the weather itself was going to be probably one of the major obstacles both of them faced on the road westward to Solitude. The other were going to be the wolf packs that plagued the roads all over the land. Dilvari and Arander ran into several during their journey. This was just one that jumped them just outside of town when they started their trip. The next thing that faced them on the road was an attack from frostbite spiders. After many hours of travel, they were frozen to the bone and they needed to seek shelter. Fortunately, they found a structure, and it turned out to be the Hall of the Vigilant. This was the headquarters of the Vigilance of Stendarr.
You speak to a Vigilant of Stendarr.
Not knowing who they were, Dilvari
we will hunt you down.
asked a few questions.
Yes. Our order was founded after the Oblivion Crisis. We dedicate our lives to facing the threat of Daedra wherever they appear.
So the two of them took warmth and shelter in the hall, and Dilvari wanted to talk to the leader of the Vigilance.
The suffering the Daedra cause will not go unpunished. He is the god of mercy, the patron of order and justice for all of Tamriel. We bring his compassion where none can be found, by cleansing all those who would offend his children. Stendarr be with you.
And so, warmed and refreshed, they decided to hit the road again westward. They were hoping to make the small swamp town of Morthal before the sun went down. They came across old ruins, which they pretty much decided to stay out of, though Dilvari could not resist the urge to stick her nose into what appeared to be some sort of either altar site or ceremonial burial grounds. Nothing really came of that, and they made a fire in the wilderness as they continued on through the day. They did make Morthal, fortunately, before the sun went down, and had gotten a little lost, but they made their way there, and then decided to spend the night in the Moorside Inn.
There ain't much to offer, but if you want a place dry to spend the night, I'll rent you a room.
Hoping to make Solitude or Dragonbridge by the end of this day, they set out from Morthal, heading up the road without incident. They did come across the ruins of an old keep or a castle, but they decided to give it a pretty wide berth as it appeared skeletons were guarding the entrance. Dilvari discussed the situation with Arander, and they decided both of them would be better off if they just left it alone. So they headed on down the road. As Dilvari heads down the road, I wanted to take a moment to have you guys help me with Dilvari's character. We know very little about her background, and I'm really struck by the face paint or the face tattoo she has of a skull. I think it's very menacing, and it indicates a dark background. So I'm going to give you 4 choices for me to go off of with what that background entails. Does that background entail A, bandits, B, vampires, C, necromancers or daedric activity, or D, does Dilvari have amnesia and just doesn't know? Answer below in the comments, and then we'll move forward with the story from there. As Dilvari and Arander came near Dragonbridge, they came across an unfortunate sight. A merchant and his wife had been killed by attackers, and Dilvari felt it was necessary to not only investigate, but to take the bodies and move them to the side and lay them to rest. Arander said a few words, and then it was time to head on to Dragonbridge. As Dilvari neared the landmark she was looking forward to seeing for the first time, she realized that some Imperial soldiers were leading a prisoner out of town, and made her feel a little uncomfortable, so she just decided to head on by. The trip from Morthal had been going very well. That was until an idiot out of nowhere decided that Dilvari had way too much money and that she needed to share.
All right, hand over your valuables, or I'll gut you like a fish.
As a mad fox ran through the scene, Dilvari decided to intimidate the thief, trying to explain that that was just not a good idea.
Nice try, but you don't scare me. I'm not going to ask again.
Unfortunately, the thief would not see it any other way. Words were exchanged, and it all ended in violence.
Don't you walk away from me. Safe travels.
Fortunately, with Arander's help, Dilvari showed the thief the error of their ways with nary a scratch. The rest of the trip up to Solitude was pretty uneventful. They came to the gate. The guards gave them no issues as they entered into the city. After such a long trip, the first order of business was to find a place to stay that had a warm bed and good food. So they went into the Winking Skeever, where they were able to find both.
Welcome to the Winking Skeever, friend. Sure thing. It's yours for a day.
The next morning, they had a conversation outside of the Winking Skeever. Dilvari wanted to sell some of the items that she had found in Nightcaller Temple, including the intricate robes of Vermina and some of the other items that they'd been able to sell along the way. Arander recommended that they go over to Bits and Pieces first, and then head up into the Imperial Complex, the Imperial headquarters, and then on to the Temple of Divines.
Trinkets, odds and ends, that sort of thing.
Dilvari was able to get a pretty good price for the Vermina's devotion robe, as well as the other robes that she had been carrying with her in her pack. She was somewhat uncomfortable being around all the Imperial soldiers in the Imperial complex, so she didn't tarry long. Instead, she headed towards her destination, the Temple of the Divines.
Blessings of the 8 divines upon you. How may I help?
Entering into the temple, she was not disappointed and spoke with the first priestess.
You look troubled. Have you come seeking guidance? Feel free to take a seat or pray at the shrines. We appreciate worship in all its
She asked
forms.
about the shrines and what they did.
Those who worship at the shrines will sometimes receive boons from the gods themselves. The nature of the favors varies per deity. Please, feel free to worship at any or all of the shrines.
Let us walk in the steps of the
As
divines.
Dilvari walked towards the head of the temple, to the location where all the shrines of the divines were located, she felt a deep peace come over her, and she knew that she was in the right place at the right time. There was a priestess there that she spoke with briefly.
Blessings to you. The divines are listening. The divines saved me from the streets, and they can save you from your trials as well.
The priestess's words strike a chord in Dilvari, and as she looks at the shrines gathered around her and she thinks of where she is and what she has been through to get here, she realizes that she is at a point in her life where she needs to make a choice. And this is the point where you get to help her with that choice. She has 4 paths in front of her. A, does she become a pilgrim traveling to the shrines and temples of Skyrim? B, does she return to the Hall of the Vigilant and become a Vigilant of Stendarr against the Daedra? C, does she choose a divine to follow and that will lead her in all of her actions forward from here? Or D, does she decide she has all the answers she needs and leave the Hall of Divines behind her and move on to a different part of her life? Answer below in the comments, and we will see you next episode.